Was I wrong for what I did? Honestly, I've replayed it 1,000 times in my head, and each time I come to the same conclusion. But I need to hear it from you. I need to know if you would have done the same thing. When someone you trusted, someone you considered family, stole every single penny of your meticulously saved vacation fund, leaving you with nothing but a broken dream and a mountain of debt. My answer involved trading his entire promising career for cold, hard cash. Tell me, would you have done the same? Let me take you back to where it all began, to a time when I was incredibly naive, brimming with optimism, and a little too trusting. It was about 5 years ago. I was in my late 20s, working a stable but unexciting job, and dreaming of escaping the mundane. My best friend Mark and I had been inseparable since high school. We went to college together, shared an apartment for a few years, and even worked at the same company, though in different departments. Mark was like a brother to me, truly. We knew each other's deepest secrets, celebrated every success, and commiserated through every failure. He was the kind of friend you'd call in the middle of the night if your car broke down, and he'd be there without question. At least, that's what I thought. Our big dream, one we'd been talking about since we were teenagers, was to backpack through Southeast Asia. We'd spent countless evenings poring over travel blogs, marking down must-see temples in Thailand, idyllic beaches in the Philippines, and bustling markets in Vietnam. It wasn't just a trip. It was the trip. A once-in-a-lifetime adventure we'd been saving for since we got our first part-time jobs. I had a dedicated savings account, labeled Southeast Asia Adventure Fund, and every extra dollar I earned went straight into it. I skipped nights out, cooked at home instead of ordering takeout, and even picked up freelance gigs to accelerate my savings. It was a sacrifice, but I genuinely believed it would be worth it. Mark was doing the same, or so he said. He was a bit more spontaneous with his money, always buying the latest gadgets or going on last-minute road trips. But he assured me he was saving too, just in a less rigid way. I didn't question it. Why would I? He was Mark. The plan was to go for a full month, ideally in the spring, to catch the best weather. We'd budgeted around $2,000 each for flights, accommodation, food, and activities. For me, $2,000 was a significant chunk of change, representing years of careful saving. As the departure date drew closer, about 6 months out, we started looking at flight deals. That's when Mark brought up a proposal. He knew I was incredibly diligent with my money, always on top of my finances, whereas he admitted he was a bit disorganized. He suggested that since I was so good with managing funds, I should hold both our shares of the vacation money in my savings account. He said it would be easier to book flights and hotels if the money was all in one place. And he trusted me implicitly. He even offered to transfer his $2,000 to me right away, which he did a few days later. I remember feeling a bit hesitant, not because I didn't trust him, but because it felt like a big responsibility. However, his reasoning made sense, and his trust in me was flattering. So I accepted, consolidating our combined $4,000 into my Southeast Asia Adventure Fund. It felt good, like we were truly committed now, two halves of a whole, ready for our big adventure. Life continued as usual for a few months. We'd occasionally discuss our trip, getting excited about the places we'd visit and the experiences we'd have. I kept my part of the bargain, not touching a single penny of the fund. My excitement grew with each passing day. Then, about 2 months before our planned departure, something shifted. Mark started acting a little strange. He became evasive when I brought up the trip, always changing the subject or claiming he was too busy to look at flight options. I brushed it off at first, thinking he was just stressed with work. But the evasiveness grew, and a knot of unease began to form in my stomach. He started canceling our regular hangouts, claiming he had sudden engagements or felt unwell. It wasn't like him. Mark was usually the life of the party, always eager to make plans. One evening, I finally confronted him. We were supposed to meet for dinner, and he canceled at the last minute with a flimsy excuse about a family emergency. I called him, my voice probably betraying my frustration. "Mark, what's going on? You've been acting weird for weeks. Are you still excited about the trip? Is everything okay?" There was a long silence on the other end, an agonizing pause that felt like an eternity. Then he mumbled, his voice barely audible, "I need to tell you something, but I don't know how." My heart sank. I knew with a dreadful certainty that it was about the money. I met the next day at a quiet coffee shop, and I could tell immediately something was terribly wrong. Mark looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a nervous fidgeting. He confessed. He had, in his words, borrowed the money. Not just his $2,000, but my $2,000 too. All $4,000. He said he had gotten into some unexpected financial trouble, a bad investment, a car repair, something vague and unconvincing. He promised he would pay it back, of course, but it wasn't a matter of if, but when. He had no immediate way of returning the funds. He was practically begging, his voice cracking, appealing to our friendship, our history. He said he was desperate, that he was truly sorry, and that he hadn't meant to jeopardize our trip. I felt a cold shock, followed by a burning wave of betrayal. My carefully built dream shattered in an instant. Not only was our trip gone, but my hard-earned money I had sacrificed so much for, was gone too. It wasn't just $2,000. It was the accumulation of years of discipline and anticipation. It was the principle of it, the absolute violation of trust. I remember sitting there, staring at him, my mind reeling, trying to process the magnitude of his deception. He wasn't just a friend, he was a thief, and he had taken everything I had saved. When I asked him how he accessed my account, he confessed that he had seen me input my online banking password a few times, and he had simply guessed it based on a pattern he knew I used. He had then transferred the money in small increments over a few weeks, thinking I wouldn't notice until it was too late. He was right. The worst part was that he hadn't even had the decency to tell me until I forced it out of him. He was going to let me find out when I tried to book flights, leaving me stranded and scrambling. My vacation fund wasn't just gone. It was gone at the hands of my best friend, someone I considered family. I was furious, heartbroken, and utterly devastated. The trip was gone, and I was left with an empty savings account and a crushing sense of betrayal. He offered an apology, tears in his eyes, but it felt hollow, almost rehearsed. He kept repeating how sorry he was, how he'd make it up to me, but there was no plan, no timeline, just empty promises. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling hollowed out. The immediate future was bleak. Not only could I not go on the trip, but I also had bills to pay, and that $2,000 was meant to cover some of them, giving me a cushion while I was away. Now I was facing a financial strain, all because of Mark. I tried to reason with him over the next few days, urging him to come up with a repayment plan, anything. He kept saying he would, But no concrete plan ever materialized. He'd deflect, make excuses, and eventually just stop responding to my calls and texts altogether. It was clear he had no intention of paying me back anytime soon, if ever. My anger festered into a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just going to let him get away with it. He needed to face consequences. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let it go for the sake of a long friendship? Would you have taken legal action? Or would you have found a different way to ensure justice was served? I genuinely want to know. I spent a few sleepless nights agonizing over my options. Going to the police seemed extreme, and honestly, I wasn't sure if they'd even be able to recover the money quickly, if at all. Legal action felt equally daunting and expensive, something I couldn't afford given my new financial predicament. But I couldn't just do nothing. Mark had not only stolen my money, but also trampled on our friendship and my trust. He had shown a complete disregard for my feelings and my financial well-being. He needed to learn that actions have consequences. It dawned on me that Mark had a very promising career. He worked in a high-profile department at our company, and he was being groomed for a management position. He had a spotless record, a reputation as a diligent and trustworthy employee. This was his Achilles heel. I knew that any stain on his professional record would be devastating for him, especially given the cutthroat nature of our corporate environment. It was a risky move, but I started to formulate a plan. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about getting my money back and ensuring he understood the gravity of what he had done. I started by gathering evidence. I had the bank statements showing his $2,000 transfer to my account and then the subsequent withdrawals that emptied it, which, combined with his confession, would be hard to dispute. I also had our text messages, where I was asking about the trip money and he was being evasive, and eventually his partial admission of guilt in a desperate attempt to appease me. It wasn't a full confession in writing, but it was enough to paint a very clear picture. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. I printed out all the relevant documents, carefully arranging them. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was firm. I knew what I had to do. I requested an urgent meeting with our HR manager, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Davies, known for her strict adherence to company policy and ethics. When I sat across from her, I laid out my story, calmly and factually, presenting the evidence. I explained that Mark had stolen $4,000 from me, money that was intended for a joint vacation, and that he had used deceptive means to access my account. I emphasized that this wasn't just a personal issue. It was a matter of integrity and trust, qualities essential for someone in a leadership role within the company. I explained how he had exploited my trust and how this reflected on his character. Miss Davies listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she asked a few clarifying questions, examining the bank statements and text messages. She seemed particularly concerned about the method he used to access my account, viewing it as a breach of privacy and a serious ethical lapse. I knew then that I had hit a nerve. Her final question was, "What do you want to happen, my name?" This was the moment of truth. I took a deep breath. "I want my $4,000 back," I said, my voice steady, "and I want Mark to understand the consequences of his actions. I believe someone who would steal from a close friend and then ghost them when confronted is not fit for a management position or perhaps even to remain employed here. I wasn't directly asking for him to be fired, but I was making it very clear what I thought. I had essentially laid out an ultimatum. Either he pays me back and faces the consequences of his actions within the company, or he risks losing his entire career. Miss Davies assured me she would look into considered it immediately, and that I would be contacted within 24 hours. The rest of that day at work was a blur. I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Had I gone too far? Was I being too harsh? But then I remembered the months of saving, the dreams of Southeast Asia, the crushing disappointment, and the utter betrayal, and my resolve hardened once more. He had left me no choice. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Miss Davies. She informed me that she had confronted Mark with the evidence. He had initially tried to deny it, but when presented with the facts and the potential severity of the internal investigation, he had broken down and confessed everything. The company's stance was that his actions constituted a serious breach of company ethics and could even be considered theft. Given the use of company property, our shared office computers were sometimes used for personal banking, and he had learned my password at work. She informed me that Mark was being given a choice. Either he immediately repay the full $4,000 to me and accept a formal disciplinary warning, which would effectively halt his career progression at the company for the foreseeable future, or the company would proceed with a full internal investigation, which would almost certainly lead to his termination and potentially even legal action. He chose to pay. Within hours, the $4,000 appeared back in my bank account. It wasn't his usual banking account. It was a transfer from what I later found out was his emergency fund, likely depleted completely. I also heard through the grapevine that he was put on a performance improvement plan, had his promotion indefinitely delayed, and was effectively blacklisted from any sensitive roles within the company. He didn't lose his job, but his career trajectory was irrevocably altered, all for $4,000. He tried to contact me, sending a long, rambling apology text, begging for my forgiveness, and asking me to retract my complaint. I didn't respond. The trust was shattered beyond repair. Our friendship was over. The aftermath was bittersweet. I had my money back, and I eventually went on that Southeast Asia trip, albeit alone. It wasn't the same as I had envisioned with Mark, but it was still an incredible experience, and the money I had saved truly made it possible. I learned a harsh lesson about trust, about friendship, and about the importance of protecting myself. Mark stayed at the company for another year or so, but he was a shadow of his former self, always looking over his shoulder, his ambition visibly deflated. He eventually left for a much less prestigious role at a smaller company, his once bright career prospects significantly dimmed. So, here I am, years later, still wondering if I did the right thing. Did I overreact? Was the cost to his career too high for what he did? He stole my dream, my hard-earned money, and he betrayed a decade of friendship. I got my money back, but I lost a friend, and he lost his professional standing. It felt like justice at the time, a necessary consequence for an unforgivable act. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, I wonder if there could have been another way. What do you think? Was my decision justified? Like this video if you were on my side. Subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comment section below. I'll see you all in the next story.